to the pandemic, including masks, are not made in Africa. They are made outside of Africa. Minister, how do you think that CFTA can be an opportunity for local development, to promote local production, to promote the industrialization of the continent? And you specifically in Rwanda, what are the steps that you intend to take to make the CFTA a reality in this post-COVID era? Minister Biruta, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator, and sorry for being a little bit late, and technology has failed us and you have missed the first part of this conversation. But let me just say that this year 2020 was supposed to be a milestone for our continent, with trading under the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement scheduled to start on July 1st, 2020. Instead, we are now dealing with the crippling effects of the pandemic. Yet, this pandemic has shown us that self-sustainability matters, and it is important mostly for food security, education, healthcare, logistical services, and so on. One of the objectives of the CFTA is to make the continent self-reliant in these various sectors. And as we move forward, we need to develop a framework with realistic implementation plans to improve self-sustainability in these key sectors, including the ones you mentioned, for the manufacturing of these supplies we needed to deal with COVID-19. And actually, in some of African countries, this pandemic has shown that you have some capacity actually to manufacture some of these items. At least for items like masks. Even here in Rwanda, we are manufacturing them. But what we need to do is just to build on this momentum and make sure that we understand that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is an important tool for this continent to be able to self-sustain itself and to be able to trade with the rest of the world as a continent. COVID-19 demonstrated the importance actually of implementing this agreement, and the current momentum needs to be maintained as a mechanism for building resilience and managing long-term volatility. A well-implemented CFTA would go a long way in reducing Africa's reliance on donor funds and external aid in a global and continental recession. There is indeed an urgent need to reduce the continent's high trade dependence on non-African partners. And as we have seen during this pandemic, even this dependence has not helped very much, because at some point, you remember, some of these items were not even accessible for most of us, most of our countries, even when you had money to pay for it. Everybody was struggling to get the test kits, to get a mask, to get various items, and it was at some point very difficult to get those supplies. So maximizing the potential of these CFTA will be an effective shock absorber in the if the global economy remains depressed by the pandemic and its uncertainty. We need really to understand that this pandemic, even if it has delayed the implementation of the CFTA, it needs to let us understand that we need it urgently. We need to implement it, to build our self-reliance and to be able to compete on the global stage. And we need also to understand that we need to build our capacity on the African continent to be able to face future pandemics or other disasters which will be coming in the future. So the pandemic has delayed the implementation of CFTA, but it is also an opportunity for us really to understand the importance of this tool and to build on that momentum, fast track the implementation of the CFTA, and keep monitoring it so that we can deliver the result we are expecting from it. Thank you.
Lord Minister Biruta for this insightful comments. You said it rightly, CFTA is a wake-up call for all of us. It will not be the last pandemic to hit us. It recalls us of the need to build this, reliance and self-reliance. It also reminds us of the urgency of even to speed up the implementation of the CFTA. Thank you for that, Minister. Let me at this point to turn also to our friend Dr. Karingi from the CFTA, from the Economic Commission for Africa, where he is the Director of Regional Integration. Dr. Karingi, can you help us just to understand to what extent do you think the free trade area can promote the prosperity among the African countries, African economies, which are mostly extrovert economy? It means that these are not complementary economies. They are all mostly producing goods for exports, mineral for exports. So how do you think the CFTA can then help to create prosperity in Africa in that particular context, in this post-colonial legacy that we have? Dr. Karingi, please.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Diop. Let me acknowledge His Excellency, former Prime Minister Desalegn, and also the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Rwanda, and also all the other ministers and leaders and participants with us. Before I answer that question, Ambassador, I wanted to start by saying that actually the AFCFTA is rooted in the core principles of Pan-Africanism, because we are trying to look at how the AFCFTA could actually foster Pan-Africanism. And it is my thesis, and for those who have actually been working so hard on the AFCFTA, that the AFCFTA is itself rooted on the core principles of Pan-Africanism. Now, so if I was to come to the question that you have asked, I have listened to the former Prime Minister. He did actually talk about the economic implications of the AFCFTA. But just to give an idea of what the work of the Economic Commission for Africa has shown, and work that has actually been quite convincing when it comes to engaging the negotiators on the benefits of the AFCFTA. If today you are to implement the agreement on the protocol of trading goods alone, and you also deal with the connectivity question as highlighted by the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, by 2040, if we have done all this, we would actually be able to add close to $70 billion every year in terms of additional intra-African trade. Now, this is significant because more than $40 billion of that is additional every year, would actually be in value added goods. So the Minister for Rwanda has actually mentioned that at the start of the pandemic, or at the height of the pandemic, the global supply chains locked up, and it was even very difficult for Africa to get supplies for pharmaceuticals and medical supplies. But what we have seen is that through the African Medical Supplies Platform, that the African Union has actually been at the lead in terms of putting it together, we have actually seen a good number of the suppliers to that platform are actually African manufacturers who are actually able to repurpose their factories and to keep their industries running. So if you take it that the numbers show that more than 2/3 of the additional intra-African trade would actually be in value added. And then if you add the fact that COVID-19 has actually demonstrated to us that we do actually have that capacity, then it is clearly a case, or at least there is evidence or the proof of the concept that the AFCFTA will actually deliver on trade. Now, why is this issue of trade important? This issue of trade is important for Africa because when it comes to financing development, a lot of us talk about aid, we also talk about FDI, we have lately been talking about remittances, but the earnings that Africa gets from trade is actually more than $500 billion every year. Now, this is more than remittances, FDI, and aid all added together. So if you were to think in terms of financing our economies, the AFCFTA is actually offering us an opportunity to at least be able to help our private sector keep going and actually recover from the pandemic that we have seen. So I would want to argue that the AFCFTA, when it comes to not only delivering on the benefits, economic benefits in terms of manufacturing, high quality jobs, it will also allow the African governments, or at least the African people, to be able to finance their development. Now, if you allow me, because we are talking about Pan-Africanism, and I'll take only 2 minutes on this. I think as an African citizen, someone who is not sitting in the same level as the former prime minister or the minister, I think the AFCFTA will only have meaning if we start thinking in terms of the people. Pan-Africanism should not be about the states. It should be about the African people. And I think because we said we want to talk honestly and freely under this Tana forum, I would want to argue that when we think of the new Pan-Africanism, we need to start thinking about the African people. You have mentioned that you would want to see the youth benefit from the AFCFTA. We have said that we want to see the women benefit from the AFCFTA. Now, they cannot be able to benefit from that if we continue allowing national interests when it comes to the conversations about the AFCFTA to drive the actions that we want to take as governments in terms of finalizing the tariff offers, the rules of origin. So we need to start thinking about the people more closely, and that's the only way we can actually ensure that the spirit of Pan-Africanism becomes entrenched even in our young people who do not actually have these colonial hangovers or the colonial history hangover, and they just want to see themselves as Africans. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Very good points. First, CFTA is an opportunity to see Africa beyond aid, to help us to promote, to finance our own development. 500 billion opportunity to raise resources for the continent versus more or less about 50 billion that we are getting for development assistance today. Second, Pan-Africanism is mostly about people. I think that's lesson. We should keep that one. Let me turn again to you, Your Excellency, former Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn. I was recalling that you were at the helm of the continent as the leaders were devising to establish this new vision of the silencing the gun. Today you are here with all the experience that you have gained in and outside of the government. How do you think the CFTA can provide an added benefit to peace and security and ultimately to the realization of the vision of silencing the gun?
Thank you very much, Ambassador, again. I think, first of all, people raise guns simply because they feel that they are marginalized in terms of economic opportunity, as well as equitable distribution of wealth of the country. And so if that's the case, then we should have, a shared, equitable, and an inclusive economic growth and development in Africa. And each and every country should, ascertain that people get, the equal benefits from the wealth that's created in that country. Marginalization in many cases, it could be an ethnic group or a certain portion of society or a section of society like the youth and women. These are the ones usually resent by our performance in the African context, and that creates lots of conflict. And I think this is the main reason why African Continental Free Trade Area can contribute to minimize, this conflict or somehow resolve this conflict by addressing the real quest of the people. As my colleague said, the African Continental Free Trade Area and Pan-Africanism at large is of the people. It's not of the political elites or business elites or whatever. So if that's the case, then an inclusive, shared, and equitable growth is important. The second issue is, if you look into the African economic growth narrative, most of the African countries are growing very slowly, and that do not address the real quest of the people. So we need an accelerated, robust economic growth. And if that's the case, then African Continental Free Trade Area contributes to this very enormously. And we have to harness this potential at our disposal at this moment. But when you look into the global context, now at this time, the African Continental Free Trade Area has come at a real phase where the international community, especially the big players, are going for protectionism and marginalizing African continent because they are, working for preferential trade regimes like the Chinese or the European Union or United States or Canada. They go for some regional or continental trade agreements than the global WTO regime that works for all of us. So Africa is marginalized at this moment. If you continue on marginalization in the African continent, then it will not be easy for Africa to develop very fast and robust economic growth. So we need this continental free trade area to silence guns because after all, we are here to fight poverty. And if you don't address the real cause of poverty, then I think you can't silence guns at this time. So it's intertwined, and you cannot separately see peace and security without looking into robust economic growth and social transformation. So I think this is very, very essential. If I need to give some examples, look what Boko Haram is doing in Nigeria. Why it is in the northern Nigeria that Boko Haram has become so aggressive. If you look into the educational performance in the northern Nigeria, you will see that it is much more below the national average in Nigeria. And if you look into the economic opportunities of these marginalized societies, especially the pastoral community, then it obviously you can see why Boko Haram has been breeding in the northern part of Nigeria. And you can look into similarly Al-Shabaab in Somalia. But you go down to each country, and when you see communal violence and conflict, in most cases, areas where there is marginalization are more prone to conflict and lack of peace and security, and they go for AK-14. So the whole thing is we need to address this issue outright through integrating our African economy. United, we will prosper. Divided, we will perish. So I think that's the ideal of Pan-Africanism, and we need to integrate our economy as quickly as possible. But again, I want to capitalize on the point that if our leadership is not taking this seriously, Africa will continue to be marginalized. Africa will not play its role in the global economy and the global setting. And we can only play this by having economy of scale and compete with other global continental bodies. So we need to integrate very quickly and aggressively work towards that. So I think silencing the gun is possible, but each and every individual country should go hand in hand, We have to share best practices in West Africa to East Africa or to Southern Africa. So I think this needs a governance system and an institutional setup that helps to address the issue in depth.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We need societies and countries which are well governed. We need a more inclusive society, country, and government. But the response to CFTA and to peace and security also remain once again Pan-Africanism and integration. Let me now at this point turn again to Minister Biruta in Rwanda. At the beginning of my statement, I was bringing some figure that by 2050, Africa will have the youth population of about 830 million. And probably projection can go even higher. We said Pan-Africanism is about citizens, and the young people is at the heart of the project everywhere. And we know the youth unemployment is a big concern around the continent. It's a major issue in Rwanda as well. We know that Africa today, the formal economy in Africa, is only able to generate 3 million jobs per annum. And we know that the labor market is receiving every year 10 to 12 million people. So how do you think, Minister, that using the CFTA and all the economic tools that we have, what are the best strategies that we, government, civil society, and other actors, including private sector, can put in place to create a generated development which can help us to absorb these young people? Because responding to the needs of our young people is not only an economic imperative, it's also a national and regional security for all of us. Either we use these young people as an opportunity, we invest in them, or they become a threat to any of us, and then we are sitting on a time bomb. So how do you think we can respond to this challenge using the CFTA to provide job and opportunity to our young people? Minister Biruta.
Thank you. You have already said it. For me, CFTA is about economic opportunities. It's about job creation. It is about wealth creation, actually. And we need to make sure it is inclusive. And we need to make sure that that youth you were talking about is equipped with the right skills to be able to be integrated in the economy and to be actually the engine of that economy we're talking about. So youth employment is key. But for the youth to be really integrated in the economy, it needs to be educated. The youth need to have the right skills so that they can drive or that transformation we are looking at. The youth today we are talking about, when we refer to this instability in some parts of Africa, that youth is utilized because those young people don't have the right skills. They are not integrated in the economy. They don't see the future. And while we talk about trade, intra-African trade, while we talk about the trade between Africa and the other continents, we need to make sure that the journey is really inclusive. And we need to build on the young people of this continent to make sure that those will be actually the one to lead the transformation. And investing in education is key. And when I talk about education, I'm not necessarily meaning university education, or that is very important, but there are other very many sectors on this continent where we need skills and that we need to develop. And we, at the same time, we create opportunities for these young people to be integrated in the economy. And here I'm referring to the technical and vocational training. Our economies need carpenters, the economy need mechanical experts. We need all these people are needed in our continent. And if we invest properly, we'll be able to absorb that youth in the transformation journey. Otherwise, planning any development of this continent without really considering the youth and the women, it is a waste of resources in the first place. And whatever we'll be doing will not be sustainable if we don't integrate the youth and the women. And we need to look at the youth not as really an impediment or whatever. The youth is the solution. It is the solution, but we need to make sure that we invest properly in that youth to equip it with the right skills or with the right knowledge, so that tomorrow and after tomorrow they are actually the one to lead the continent and to drive that transformation we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Minister Biruta. We have to manage also the time. I will just ask my last question to Stephen, and then I'm receiving many contribution and question from participants online. I will also give an opportunity also, since they are outside of this room, for an opportunity for the questions to be answered, as well as we'll pass also to the participant in the room. So Steve, my last question for you is the following. Stephen, I know you have done a lot of work on the implementation of the CFTA. As I said previously, we are in the paradox. While we are expediting the implementation of the CFTA, we realize that the protocol on the free movement is only ratified by 4 countries. Congratulations to Minister Biruta, who is among Rwanda, which is among the 4 countries who has ratified this protocol, which is very important development. We hope that by the next summit or beyond, we'll have many countries. So, Steve, my question to you is the following. How can we effectively implement the CFTA when the protocol on free movement is not implemented and is very far from being implemented? So, and what would be the strategies to ensure that we are embarking not only in the free market, but how can we ensure that African talent, African people can also be in the position to move? As I said, also our Pan-African vision is also to allow Africans to marry, to know each other, to share our cultural heritage. So what is the strategies for us to ensure that we are not only establishing a free trade area for goods, but also we are establishing a free movement of people to make it a reality, that our young people don't have to risk their life in the Mediterranean Ocean for opportunity, while we think this El Dorado is definitely on the continent, but maybe we don't see it.
No, thanks, Ambassador Diop. Actually, that's a great question. I would like to, first of all, ask, why is it that countries are not ratifying this protocol on the free movement of people? Why is it that countries, if you look at the African Development Bank Visa Openness Index, it's just a few countries that allow Africans to be able to come to their countries without the need of visa. Yes, it's true, there has been an improvement when it comes to the visa openness, but why is it that that is the case? And I think it goes back to the first question to the question that the Prime Minister was responding